So I investigated how SooWei makes over $224,000 a month selling info consulting, and what I found will shock you, perhaps even horrify you. Let's go ahead and hop right on into it. So over here on the YouTube, pretty standard stuff. I'm just going to be going over like his top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel content. What's interesting to note about SooWei is that versus other people, he has more of an even distribution in terms of like the types of content he's doing, I would say, where you see like a lot of people focus on just bottom of funnel content where it's like really just specifically targeting pain points of their ICP. But he has like more of an even distribution where he has like the top of funnel content of like vlogs and stuff like that. It's nothing like, you know, Brez and TJR, which is like absolutely wild stuff because I don't think that's his style. But you really have sort of the whole enchilada with SooWei. And so like to actually go into the more nitty gritty of what his content is looking like, this is like a vlog that I just pulled up as an example. And one thing that I think is really interesting about his personal brand is that he actually focuses on the relationship aspect of building a personal brand. And so that's honestly like what I just think a personal brand is. But when a lot of people like hear personal branding, they just think of pretty much building up a personal brand and gaining traction organically to sell a product. But they don't really do the most important thing, which in my opinion is not selling your product, but actually selling yourself. Because that, in my opinion, is the most effective way to sell your product. The info market is flooded with similar offers to yours. And so ultimately what's going to make you stand out is your personality and the things that you like and your interests and stuff like that. And so the more like authenticity you can inject into your business, ultimately the better it's going to do. And so what he's doing is oftentimes talking about, you know, like how the business is going, like whether it's like a low month or a high month or it's going really good. Like honest life update. And also like another aspect of the vlog is that obviously it's going to be more focused around like the ideal lifestyle of the person clicking on the video, because obviously this is more mass awareness based content because, you know, I moved into my dream apartment at 20. Most of the time is going to appeal to more people than something like, hey, like the exact fulfillment process I used to charge 20K for my consulting service, because it's a lot wider of a range of people that would be interested in this topic, right? Versus this, because not everyone's going to own a consulting business, obviously. But even though it is more mass awareness content, he's showing like the ideal lifestyle that someone that owns like a consulting or info business would want to have. I mean, like you see him in like the penthouse or wherever he's at. I mean, you see the dream lifestyle that most people in that niche have. Moving on over here, that was an example obviously of like top of funnel content. I like labeled it there with colors, but moving on to like an example of like the middle funnel content. So what he's done is pretty much copied the same format that Alex Ramosi was using, where he would basically like fly out a business owner and show them like the constraints of their business and how to fix it or whatever. But I really like it here because I haven't really seen this formula like adapted as much into the info space. And it's like really going to provide him more proof than anything else, simply because I really think that like he's sort of like painting himself as like the sort of like wizard at the top of a mountain. Like you sort of have like the people here, and it lets you actually like visualize what it would be like to be coached by SooWei, because oftentimes what people do is they make like really quote unquote valuable content, but they don't actually show what the process of you coaching them would ever look like. And like you ever learn anything about like direct response copy, like in a sales letter, for example, you always want to go over what the experience is actually going to be like after the person signs up or clicks the button or buys the thing or whatever, because people are much more likely to go along with something if they actually know what to expect. And so this actually lets you sort of paint a picture in your mind and like actually see yourself like in the shoes of this guy, like saying like, hey, this could be me. SooWei could be going over my business and like, you know, showing my constraints or whatever, showing how I'm going wrong and like helping me to scale, right? Moving on over to number 3, I wanted to go over like what the format of his value videos look like. What he does is 99% of the time, pretty much, he's in front of like a whiteboard here. And so I think he just basically films these most of the time just during his masterminds or whatever. Like you can see him there. You can see him like in front of the whiteboard there, in front of the whiteboard there. And there's a few reasons that I think he does this. I think the main reason that he's doing this is that it sort of gives him an assumed authority in a sense. And so when you click on this video, it's sort of like, it's not like in your face that this dude is successful and, you know, like this dude like has the authority to actually be able to teach you something. It's sort of like a built-in proof element where he doesn't really have to like at the start of the video be like, hey, like I've made like $1 million in consulting and I've done all this thing for my clients and, you know, I've implemented this and done all this. He doesn't even have to say any of that. The fact that he's in front of like all these people listening to him, of like you being one of them, is really more proof than anything that he could ever possibly say. And so moving on over to 4 here, I just wanted to go over like what he's doing in terms of his free course. So every few months what he does, or what he seems to be doing at least currently, is he drops like a free course. And so this was the first one, which I would say like was probably a turning point of his business, simply because like of how much the video blew up. So 45K views on that, which is obviously really rare in the business space. And that's like a ton of top of funnel traffic as well. And so as for why I think he does this, is sort of the same themes. It's crazy top of funnel traffic simply because it's a very broad sort of thing. Let me look at the thumbnail here. Literally all he says is, if I wanted to scale to 100 grand a month, here's what I do. And so it's not targeting like a specific problem or anything like that. It's targeting the very broad problem of scaling to 100 grand a month. It's not even like mentioning a business or anything like that. And so you can see that he's pretty much going over everything here. And so it interests a lot of people. And the fact that the video is so long, like that one's 10 hours long, if the value in the video is actually good, it's going to give him a ton of authority and proof because of the length. Moving on to number 5, I just wanted to note like how he's doing his case studies. He's sort of doing it in an interesting way where they seem less like case studies. I mean, I guess if you're like really in the biz op world, you'd still sort of be able to tell that these are case studies, but they seem less like case studies in the average video because most people at this point know to look out for like the same title formula that pretty much everyone uses, which is just like, you know, like how Damien or like insert name makes, you know, however much a month with like whatever mechanism, like copywriting or info agency or whatever. But he's sort of like avoiding that, and he just frames it slightly differently than other case studies, which I think is really good. I also wanted to mention a little bit of trend jacking that he seems to be doing here. Every time that there's some trend in like the business space or like something interesting is happening, he seems to make a video about it, or like even like copies like other formats that seem to be working in the space, which is typically like in the YouTube world known as trend jacking, right? And so like when Alex Hormozi's $100 million Money Models book came out, he made a video about it because it was very popular at the moment, right? Daniel Dalen is a person that has a much more influence than him. Therefore, the fact that, you know, like he can say like, I paid the dude $20,000, and you can see him sitting there with him. That signals to all his fans like, hey, Daniel Dalen's going to be in this video. I like Daniel Dalen. Let me check this guy out. And so it's sort of going to like cross-pollinate into his audience as well. This format was used first by like another funnel hacker like in the space, and that video was an outlier in his channels, which makes you sort of wonder why, but he just said, hey, like I'm just going to put Shelby Stapp on the thumbnail and maybe it'll do well. What do you know? It did well. Same thing like over here. I copied Iman Gadzhi. Okay, anything mentioning Iman Gadzhi is going to do a little bit better. Same thing with Hormozi. If you can associate yourself with someone else that has authority, you can steal, or I guess like cross-pollinate a little bit of their audience, right? Moving on over to the Instagram over here, he's running quite a few story sequences, and he actually mentioned, so this is like straight from the horse's mouth, like I'm not just making this up. He talked about 4 distinct types of story sequences that he runs: personality, documentation, social proof, and CTA story sequences. And so what he's doing here is personality is more based around like his interests, and like again, like it's sort of playing back into the idea of actually building a relationship with your audience, because that's actually what a personal brand is instead of just trying to promote your product. And so you shouldn't really just be trying to sell your product. The more important thing to sell is to sell yourself, because a lot of people forget to do that. And so he's, you know, quote unquote selling himself by talking about his interest, perhaps talking about the business, but that's like more of like the documentation thing, and like ultimately like showing more of himself off, right? Which leads us on to documentation, which is more like focused on the business. And it sort of like gives you a little bit of proof, because obviously like if you can say like, hey, like, oh wow, it was a really bad month this month, I only made like, you know, 91K or whatever. And then the coach that's like reading that's like, hey, like I only made like 2K a month. Like what's going on here? Maybe I want to see, you know, what's going on here. Potentially, maybe I can make 20 or 30 grand a month if I work with this guy. And so like obviously like, you know, showing the highs and the lows of the business, and that also builds a little bit of trust and relationship with the person, right? Also, social proof, again, that's what pretty much everyone does, is just, you know, spamming whenever you get good client results, because there's no reason not to. And so ultimately, like whenever someone's thinking about, you know, whether they want to book a call or whether they want to show up to the call they booked, if they can, you know, go back into your highlights or whatever and click through, you know, 500 case studies where you made to do like 5x more monthly income than he was making before, they're probably going to show up to the call, man. And so last one, CTAs, is just obviously like a call to action to, I think he does like a little bit of a mini chat funnel. I'm not sure if he CTAs directly to calls from his Instagram stories, but I know he's absolutely cranky on Instagram though, because last I heard, he said personally that he was making like 80% of his income straight off Instagram stories, which is actually freaking insane. And so I would say story sequences are still slightly untapped in the market. A few more people are starting to figure out they exist, but I would definitely say it's still like a little bit untapped to some extent. Last thing that's going on here is just a lead magnet that he has, and like oh yeah, I didn't have that in a separate tab, but it's not really that like noteworthy. All it is like, you know, hey, like I built a $2.1 million consulting business at 21. It wasn't just me. Look at all these other people. Okay, if you want to know how, you know, drop, you know, whatever keyword below and I'll, you know, shoot it over or whatever. So obviously like collecting leads there. Moving on over to his reels and what he's doing here. Again, this is straight from the horse's mouth. He says that his 2 main content types that he does is raw and authentic, and value-based content. And so that's really just the 2 things that he's doing. It's sort of like raw, authentic content. What he does is, it's sort of like an interesting style that I think a lot of people have copied nowadays. I don't know if he was the one that pioneered it or not, but it's pretty much just like this font. You typically want to do all lowercase, and then sort of like a 16:9 aspect ratio thing with like black on top and black on bottom. And then it's just like really just like unscripted content, like again, like building relationship with the audience. And then value-based content where it's just like, hey, like, you know, like the 5 mistakes you're making with whatever, or the hardest problem to break in all of business, as he says. So just value-based content there. Over here, he also has a separate Instagram account there, which he links in his bio there, Just Go Consulting. All this is basically just social proof. You can see like all the client results he has there. Literally all that is just is proof. Over here, lead magnet from ManyChat. So what this is pretty much like anytime that someone DMs him like a certain keyword. That's what this is anytime someone sends them a certain keyword, he's just going to send them over to this page. And then obviously you're going to be able to opt in and get, if I can click over to the mouse thing, you can just like opt in and you're going to get like email follow-up and stuff like that. And perhaps SMS, it looks like. Over here, what's going on over here? So this is just his main VSL that he's running, and this is pretty much like what he's linking to everywhere. Like you go over here, for instance, it's just like the same VSL, and he's like linking to it in pretty much all of his videos and from his Instagram and everything. And so pretty much everything is just being driven to this VSL. I could go over like the whole framework, but I don't feel like doing that today. So, I mean, it's very simple, like what he's doing. Starts off with a pain-based hook. And so the angle that he pretty much went for is that, hey, we are in a trust recession. And so he like pulled up this chart, you know, interpersonal trust is going down or whatever. And then like, you know, it's getting harder to do it. You know, it's getting more sophisticated or whatever. And then pretty much just transitioned into case studies and stuff like that, as well as like, you know, giving the solution, like, you know, we're going to do this certain type of content. We're going to do these certain types of ads or whatever. And at the end, obviously, it's more of just like a CTA, right? Has that. And then like a little bit of proof. That's typically like what you'll see out of most VSL funnels nowadays. Is I think the meta is sort of shifting away from text, where because like before you would typically see like a video and then like a little bit of body copy below here. But what I've noticed more people doing nowadays is pretty much just like the VSL there. And then like all this is just like straight up proof, and that's like literally it. And so yeah, it's pretty much how SooWei is making over 224 grand a month with info. I need to go get a haircut, but before I do that, there's 2 things that you can get in the description. First one is basically just a bunch of info marketing resources. Looks like a scary sales page, but it's free. It just goes to a school group with like an insane amount of resources. Like it's actually wild, and I just wrote the sales page for fun. Second one is a work with me sales page, which you can check out in the description. Second link in the description. Really funny sales page, or not necessarily funny, but entertaining sales page. And I think you'll enjoy it if you check it out. Again, like obviously, like if you want to work with me to sell more info. So it's the 2 things you can check out. Other than that, take it easy, or better yet, don't.